All right, Atma here. I'm about to talk about the new hotness for aggro, which is white weenie aggro. Um, and we're gonna talk a little bit about some other things you can do with it, and I'll even make it into a long-standing video series where every once in a while I'll add a new deck with the base core of this. The whole idea of this video is to talk about powerful white cards, powerful white humans mainly. Um, and it's mainly surrounding 5 cards, although it stretches into a little bit more depending on exactly what you're doing. The main 3 are Consul's Lieutenant and Topan Freeblade here. Uh, Aggressive 2 drops that become stronger. And Anointer of Champions, which can be played to make these guys profitably attack or just get through completely. There are other ways to do it, and other ways to do it meaning other ways to push these guys through early. Um, and you'll always add cards, whether you add different colors, that contribute to the concept of getting these guys through. Whether it's you adding blue for Reflector Mage, or adding red for burn, or trample enchantments, or whatever. I mean, people were doing mono red infectious bloodlust, and they added white to that even before this update, and that's still a thing. Um, and the other part of white weenie strategies is pumping your guys. So Gideon's ultimate pumps your guys, always watching pumps your guys. And there's a synergy with always watching and Anointer of Champions where you can attack, and then after attacks, you can tap Anointer of Champions to still get the buff without having to leave it back. So the first deck that I'm going to show you is basically it's the core basic, no frills, as aggro and low to the ground as possible. Now, if you look down here, there's 21 lands, which is usually more than you want for an aggro deck that's this low to the ground, but there is actually some stuff that calls for it, mainly Westvale Abbey. um, Westvale Abbey, flipping it, you take 5 guys, you pay 5 mana, and it becomes this 9/7 lifelink indestructible haste. This is like a fail safe in long games. It doesn't come up very often, but it comes up just enough to be worth it. And since we're mono-colored, there's no penalty, really, hardly ever, as long as you don't play this on turn 2. And that's basically why I put a couple extra lands in here, is just so that there's a contingency plan. We'll talk about some of the deck choices here. You want a lot of 1-drops, but the 2-drop slot's really where the power is. Kytheon is super aggressive, can be indestructible. The Planeswalker side just makes him a 4/4 sometimes. It's not always that relevant. Usually just the 2/1 for 1 is fine. Anointer of Champions we talked about. Expedition Envoy is just a 2/1. Topplgeist I'll talk about in a second. When it enters the battlefield, you tap target creature an opponent controls. Now, the Delirium is never going to happen in this deck. It's not going to ever happen. But this list is loosely based on a standard version, and in the place of Topplgeist, where there was Thraben Inspector, which is a 1/2 human that investigates. The reason why I didn't end up using Thraben Inspector in the end, despite the fact that it has good human synergy, is because you do want to push your guys through. So Topplgeist comes in and lets you get your Consul's Lieutenant or Topan Freeblades in a higher percentage of the time. And when you're going to the 2-drops, these are basically all humans. Knight of the White Orchid, you don't always need to get a land, but it's very nice to be able to play something else on turn 2. Knight of the Orchid on turn 3, and then getting a land, playing a land, and getting like another Topan Freeblade or whatever on turn 3. That's a pretty good ramp for a deck that is not a ramp deck. It is the exact opposite. It plays small things. Cleric of the Forward Order, there was a lot of human 2/2s for 2 type options. This one just seemed like it would be the best on average. Uh, it's a human and it gains you 2 life. Sometimes it gains you 4 and 6 life in a race against another aggro deck. That could be the difference. Um, Another way this deck pushes through is Declaration in Stone. You just kill their thing and you get in. Nimbus Wings. I don't usually like running enchantments, but I'm running 4 of these because sometimes you do get them to like 3 or 4, and then they got you blocked pretty good. And being able to +1 and just get over the top, especially on a Topan Freeblade that has Vigilance, is insane. Or if you have Always Watching, all your things have Vigilance. Um, Speaking of enchantments, I also have 2 Hope Against Hopes. This going on a human gives it first strike, but generally we have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 creatures, and you put this on even a Topplegeist that's not a human, and you just fireball them for 6 basically out of nowhere. I usually don't want to draw this in the early game. This is just a good top deck later when we're desperate. Archangel of Tithes is obscene, especially with Always Watching. As long as it's untapped, opponents have to pay 1 to attack for each creature that attacks, and the same goes for them blocking when Archangel of Tithes attacks. If you have Vigilance from Always Watching, then that payment is paid on their turn and your turn no matter what, and you can just push through. Like, this is insane. But it's Mythic. There's only 1 of them. Sometimes you get to do it, sometimes you don't. And Gideon's just the best Planeswalker. It makes humans. I actually want to talk a little bit about some of the other rares too that I didn't get to, and that's Thalia's Lieutenant and Handwear Militia Captain. Handwear Militia Captain is a 2/2. Whenever you have 4 creatures, you flip it, and it becomes a thing that makes tokens. Basically, it also has power and toughness equal to the amount of creatures you control. Usually, it's a 4/4 or a 5/5, but end of turn making 1/1 white and black human clerics that gets you wide. And Thalia's Lieutenant, +1/+1 to all other humans you control. This is another reason that Thraben Inspector is sometimes better than Topplegeist, but once again, I feel like getting in there and renowning our Topan Freeblade or Consul's Lieutenant is more important on average. And whenever you play a human, this guy gets a counter, and in fact, when this guy creates humans, these tokens, it also puts a 1/1 counter on this. So this is about as fast and one-dimensional as possible. I do think it is the best aggro deck. It's certainly the best monocolored aggro deck that is in the format right now. On the other end of the spectrum, this is about as slow as this package can do. You can do white-green, where you just have more renown guys and some pump spells. You can do, white-red, where you got the burn. You can even do white-black, where you just happen to have more removal. This is a little more insane. This is 3-color white aggro, but the concept's actually the same basic idea. Because look, it's got the same package. Kythian. I went down to 1 Expedition Envoy because when you're playing like tapped lands or trying to fix mana, you don't need as many 1-drops, but it still has like these rares. All these same rares. It still has the full set of Consul's Lieutenant and Topan Freeblade. Because it needs to kill things, because it's going to go longer. It doesn't kill quite as fast. Reprisal, Spatial Contortion, Declaration in Stone. Because it's, again, not as fast. Having Lantern Scout to just gain you a bunch of life sometimes is good in a race. And we don't have the Cleric of the Forward Order anymore. So that's still actually relevant. I'll get to the Eldrazi Displacer in a second, but Reflector Mage is a human. And of course it has Avacyn, which could probably do to go in the other deck too, but I mean, I'm just doing what I'm doing. You can always tweak these lists to your liking. The main thing with this is it's much more mid-range. It's not quite aggro, but it has the same basic package, and that's what I'm exploring here, is this concept of how far can we push the same basic idea. It has a handful of these colorless sources. The colorless sources are sort of a cherry on top. Reality Smasher, 5/5, Trample Haste. um, but I will say this about Eldrazi Displacer. Okay, so first of all, Eldrazi Displacer is bugged. It can actually exile itself. It says exile another target creature and return to the battlefield tapped. But you can exile itself to protect itself, which is, of course, just another failure by Stainless. But regardless, we'll just exploit it for now because we want to win. And even after they fix it, if they ever fix it, it'll still be good. Because it can bounce Reflector Mage, and bouncing Reflector Mage lets them, well, I should say flicker. It flickers is what Eldrazi Displacer does. When you flicker Reflector Mage, you get to bounce their things. If you can do it twice in a turn, you just bounce all their things, and they just can't win. Thought-Knot Seer isn't great to bounce, but it's fine if you're desperate. They get a card when you flicker it, but it comes right back to the battlefield. So whatever they draw plus whatever threats in their hand, you get to take that out of their hand again. So that's actually fine if you look at their hand with Thought-Knot Seer and see that they have multiple things you need to deal with, and you're actually able to do it. You can take like the removal that kills Thought-Knot Seer and then flicker Thought-Knot Seer and get the, big bomb that they can't quite cast yet. Archangel Avacyn. You can flicker Archangel Avacyn and give all your creatures indestructible. That's almost a hard lock with Eldrazi Displacer. Not quite. Exile is still a thing, but it's damn close. And yeah, so this is just the other end of the spectrum. It's still fairly fast, or at least it's got a fast start, but it backs that up with long game ways to win. Usually Eldrazi Displacer, but sometimes it just aggroes right into Thought-Knot Seer, Avacyn, or Reality Smasher and just gets there. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways you can do this deck. The same basic idea is always just going to be getting these renowned guys going. Consul's Lieutenant buffing your whole team. And that's just kind of how we're going to operate for today in this video. And I'm going to show you a couple games.